Ladies and gentlemen, on the 23rd of June, India held a memorial service in various parts of Canada for the victims of the Kanishka Airlines bombing. Days after the Canadian Parliament observed a minute's silence to commemorate the one-year anniversary of Khalistani terrorist Nijjar's death. Now, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, called it one of the worst acts of terrorism in history. For those of you who aren't well versed with this incident, let me tell you about it. On the 23rd of June back in 1985, a Montreal to New Delhi Air India Kanishka flight AI-182 exploded 45 minutes before its scheduled landing at London's Heathrow Airport. At approximately 12:30 p.m., a bomb placed in the cargo exploded. All 329 people on board, majority of whom were Indian origin Canadians, were killed. The explosion occurred at 31,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, and it was orchestrated by Khalistani terrorists. Investigations by Canada's Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service revealed that the bombing was carried out as a retaliation to Operation Blue Star. Now, the prosecution lasted nearly 20 years, making it the most expensive trial in Canadian history, costing about 130 million Canadian dollars. In 2003, members of the terrorist organization Babbar Khalsa, Ripudaman Singh Malik and Ajay Singh Bagri were charged with murder and conspiracy. They were acquitted due to lack of evidence and issues with witness credibility. Now, even though former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper publicly apologized to the victims' families in 2010, the current Premier, Justin Trudeau, is bent on undoing what his predecessor did. Trudeau's statements recently have led to Indo-Canada ties being at their lowest. With this memorial service, though, India has sent out a strong message. Let's understand what this means for the ties between India and Canada. On the broadcast, I'm joined by Daniel Bordman. He's a Canadian journalist. He's also someone who's been tweeting and reporting excessively and in detail about what Khalistani elements do in Canada. Daniel, good evening. Namaskar. Welcome to Mirror Now. First, let me understand from you, Daniel, how is this memorial service being taken by Canadians and by Indian origin Canadians there?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I believe the average Canadian is very much on the side of the victims of terrorism rather than the perpetrators of terrorism. That is where the average Canadian is. That is, of course, where the average Indian Canadian is, especially when it comes to violence against them. Unfortunately, the average party member of the Liberal and the NDP coalition government values the lives of terrorists much more than the victims. They seem to have inverted victim and perpetrator. And not just the issue of Khalistan, but many others as well. There's been a sort of moral blight on the country for the last 9 years from decision makers. So I do think it was a moving service. It got a lot of attention, and I think especially in Toronto, where the Khalistanis were not able to interrupt and harass the service, I think everything went quite well, and everyone was quite happy and uplifted with what down in Toronto. The Khalistanis, not so much. I think I made every single Khalistani on the planet mad at me yesterday, but all in a day's work, I guess.
For obvious reasons, Daniel, of course, but let me also understand from you, Daniel, you know, we saw scenes of Khalistani elements disrupting this memorial service. In the past, we've seen Justin Trudeau supporting Khalistani elements. You have certain leaders within the Canadian Parliament who support Khalistani elements outside. You also have, Khalistani terrorists heckling Indian officials there. Has there anything been done yet against any of these people?
By the security services, no. It's sort of free reign in Canada. Most of the police don't even know who's behind. I mean, the average consciousness within the institutions is rather staggering. The level of incompetence we have. So they're not really doing anything about Khalistan because they don't understand. And their primary directive put down on them from the policies. I mean, we've had, you could, the best way to describe it is, woke nonsense coming into our institutions or critical race, whatever you want to do it. But the woke nonsense in policing is the depolicing theory. So the police have shifted from their job is to prevent crimes and punish people who commit crimes to sort of keeping the peace. And by this, they have a doctrine that if a group is being loud and violent and threatening everyone, they should move the people and enforce the law on the law-abiding citizens, not the law breakers, to keep the peace. So there's no clashes in their mind. This is their primary directive. So while this is the mentality of the police can't do anything, and they won't do anything. And again, the politicians, I mean, if you look at the who's been in the Liberal cabinet since 2015, I think your answer as to what they're going to do about Khalistan is right there. And the NDP, the other part of the ruling party, just you don't even look further than the leader. So the institutions are crumbling on many issues, but I will reiterate, especially in Toronto, the people stood up to the Khalistanis and moved them away. So Canada is sort of a lawless country where you can do whatever you want, but if you do want to do the right thing and stand up to terrorists, you can do that too. But you can also be a terrorist in Canada, and that's perfectly fine as well. So this is the state of our country for the next year or so.
Daniel, you know, the likes of Pierre Poilievre, who are in the opposition, have tweeted about it, have constantly said that, you know, this is something that they condemn, this is not something that Canadians stand for and all of that. But do you expect that when they come into power, they will be able to operate independently from the Khalistani elements who are already present in the parliament or even outside of it? Is that possible, considering the fact that they are a considerable vote bank as well?
Anything is possible. I'd say that with especially with a lot of politics, we tend to scream and want a new law or someone to pass something or do something, this and that. And with a lot of the issues we're facing, in particular the Khalistani issue, the problem is not so much what's on the books. We have enough laws on the books to deal with this. It's does the leader or do the people in power have the will to enforce the law? Right. This is much more about will to enforce than what there is to enforce. Now, there are a few things I would advocate for. I'd want to put the phrase Khalistani back on the terrorist watch list and take out the watering down they gave it when Trudeau came to power and all that. But you're right to point out words are words and actions are actions. And I would not say that anyone's going to do anything until I see someone do something. So will Pierre say the right things? Possibly. Are there Khalistani elements within the CPC? Absolutely. As many as the Liberals, not as much, but what starts with 1 can go to 2. I think we get 0 to 60 quite quickly there. So there are anti-Khalistani elements within the CPC and the Conservative Party. I do know that. And it will be incumbent on Hindu Canadians to really push. If you're upset with the Khalistani presence in the Conservative Party and you just want to shrug your shoulders and say, oh, woe is me, what's happening, where am I? Well, then it's going to get worse because the Khalistanis are pushing. But if the anti-Khalistani, the Hindus and the Sikhs and the good people of Canada who are against Khalistan, who are the population majority, if they stand up and flex their political power, the problem will go away. So it's all about, will someone do something? And we can look to our political leaders.
Which is what, Daniel, leads me to my last question. Yeah. Let me also quickly ask you, Daniel, then, you know, it's been 39 years since this bombing happened, potentially and possibly one of the worst that Canada has seen in decades. But any lessons that have been learned? Clearly, you know, when it comes to support for Khalistanis, there aren't any lessons. But if you had to really list out or point out one lesson that has been learned by Canada, what would it be?
Well, it is the worst terrorist attack in Canadian history. 280 of our people died of the 329. Lessons have not been learned. That the lesson to be learned should be, you should learn lessons from situations like this. But if there is any sort of lesson you can take away from these failures now that should be radiated, is deterrence actually works. You need some, when bad people are doing something, Khalistanis, Hamas, whoever it is, if there is no deterrence, it will get worse. If you institute deterrence, it will get better.
All right. We'll leave it there. Daniel Bordman, thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now and sharing your perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. With that, let's also welcome Mr. Shreya Upadhyaya, foreign policy expert on Nation Tonight. Mr. Upadhyaya, good evening. Namaskar. Welcome to Mirror Now. Let me first ask you, you know, this is perhaps one stern message that India has given out, this time around when it comes to Canadian allegations regarding Khalistanis or Canadian support to Khalistani terrorists on their soil. How much of that actually works in diplomacy?
Good evening, Shreya. Thank you for having me. I think both of us know that there is a limit to naming and shaming, and especially given the kind of political turmoil Trudeau's ship is right now. I was just looking at the numbers. The latest polls that came in 5 days ago, Trudeau's popularity is rock bottom right now with 66% disapproval in the entire democratic world. There is no leader so much unpopular as Justin Trudeau. And this shows a mere act of desperation, whatever Trudeau is doing right now with this Khalistani issue. And whatever India might say, it is not going to have an impact. But I would like to raise one more point, Shreya. Uh, Whatever India may or may not say, that's a different story. But what is the signal that is coming out of Ottawa today is that the Liberals and the NDP would stand up in the parliament and pay their tributes to one life just because it matters to them politically, but they would not extend the same courtesy to 300 victims just because the victims, they do not mean anything politically to them. So everything that Trudeau and his allies in the parliament they do, their single calculus is uh, what is going to help us in the elections next year. And this is, this is creating a mess. This is bringing disrepute to Trudeau, to Canada, which was once considered a liberal heaven, which is now more seen as a terror heaven. Anyone can go and, find support there or safe haven there so far as they are bringing votes to the governing party, no rule of law. And no matter what the world is going to say about rule of law or of terrorism, that is not going to impact the prime minister right now because he is looking at elections.
Yeah, Chirayu Thakkar, it's interesting because Justin Trudeau, while giving that minute silence, observing that minute silence in the Canadian Parliament for Niger, he's also tweeted on the 39th anniversary of the Kanishka bombing, paying his condolences to the victims. But clearly his words and actions don't match. Everybody can see that whatever he's been tweeting doesn't really match what he's doing on ground in his policies, in his support for Khalistani elements on Canadian soil. And the irony of then listing India as a threat in your countries of threat list.
Well, I don't know if the Khalistanis they would say that put India on the list of A, B, C, X, Y, Z, anything. Justin will do anything. This is what the current situation of Canadian politics is, and no one who understands political signaling would ever compare all liberal MPs, NDP MPs standing up and paying the respect to one individual. And I would like to point this out that when the deputy prime minister was doing a press interview, even Canadian press asked them that why are you standing up in the parliament for an individual whose bank accounts you had frozen just before his death? He was on a no-flying list. And mind you, it is not the Indian government who froze his bank account. It was not the Indian government who put him on no-fly list. It was the Canadian government. The
Yeah.
Trudeau administration considered him a terrorist. And just now it suits you, you are standing up and paying tributes to him, and that would not amount to a mere tweet. If both would have been at parity, if you are tweeted for both, that would have made sense. If you have stood up for both, that would have made sense. But there is a clear hierarchy, a political signaling who matters to us in the administration. And at this moment, it is unfortunate that perpetrators of terror matter to more to Canada compared to the victims of violence.
Right. So where does this leave the India-Canada relationship, Chirayu Thakkar? We know that it's been at one of its lowest since Justin Trudeau made those wild allegations against India. By the way, he still hasn't provided us with any substantial evidence. But where does this leave the relationship between the two countries then?
Uh, I think, Shreya, there are only a few pathways, and I would like to quickly point them out. One is India, Canada, the potentialities are derailed completely. And just because of what is going on, the domestic madness in Canada. I very much likely see, and that madness will outlive Justin Trudeau. So that is one aspect of it. The second aspect is that the United States will have to intervene at some point and mediate this relationship if it wants its Indo-Pacific partners to come and work together. Now, in that situation, even the United States itself has to put its act together. If the Khalistani terrorists, if they are going to arson San Francisco conference and San Francisco consulate, and if the United States government cannot provide adequate protection there, if they are going to pander to the same community that Justin Trudeau is pandering, there is no way both these countries can come together to resolve this issue. And the third issue is that at some point, another government comes and it sees the potential ties and the Hindu community there, the Canadian Hindu community, it creates an equivalent pressure point, and perhaps it gets beholden to another domestic opinion that can only bring back these ties together. These are the only three scenarios that I foresee.
And what is it that India can do, Chirayu Thakkar? We've sent out a strong message with this memorial service. We've told Canada that we will not take it lying down, that if you can do something and you can say something, we also can. But what are the first few steps that India can take now?
Well, at this point, not much can be done. India can wait and watch, keep shaming the Trudeau government for its domestic desperation and political brinksmanship and its support for terror. That is the only thing one can do. There is no way this government is going to come back with 66% disapproval rating with the cost of living crisis that Trudeau has inflicted on Canadians. So I don't think with this outgoing government, either India has a desire or India has many tools to repair the relationship, and we'll have to wait and watch. That is the only option for the Indian government.
Let's see how this pans out and moves forward between the two countries. We'll leave it there. Chirayu Thakkar, thank you very much for joining us on Nation Tonight and sharing your perspective and helping us understand this entire situation better. Thank you very much.